My name is Kelly. This year, I turned 35. On a summer day filled with the sound of cicadas, I was called to the president's office. President, what is it? While fanning herself, seemingly bothered by the heat, my mother, the president, kept her beautiful profile turned towards me and abruptly said, "I've decided to hand over the company to your sister, so you're fired as of today." The sunlight streaming through the window was so bright, I couldn't grasp whether this was reality for a moment. What? I think I let out a foolishly vacant voice. Looking annoyed, my mother glanced at me and said, "Didn't you hear me? You're fired. We don't need you here anymore. Move out by the end of this month." As she spoke, she snapped her fan shut and dropped her gaze back to the documents on her desk as if she had finished her business. Alone in the president's office with the sound of cicadas filling the room, I slowly digested her words. "Are you still here?" "Get back to work," my mother scolded, and I mechanically backed away, said, "If you'll excuse me, close the door," and stepped out into the hallway. Our company was a small 2-story building with about 10 employees, all involved in demolition work. It was a family-run business. My mother was the president, my aunt and her husband the vice presidents, and my mother's cousin and her spouse the managing directors, with almost all authority being in my mother's hands. After high school, I worked at an accounting firm, but at 25, when told by my mother that we had no accountant, "Are you going to abandon your family in trouble? You'd be the last to suffer," she somewhat forcibly pulled me into the company. Moreover, my assigned tasks were not limited to accounting. My mother dumped everything from clerical work to miscellaneous chores on me. When we were short-handed, I was even sent out on sales calls, essentially making me a jack of all trades within the company. Despite this, I worked hard from morning till night, trying not to burden others, and somehow managed to get through the work over 10 years. Meanwhile, Samantha, who was told she would take over the company, was 3 years younger than me, at 32. She had only been with our company for 2 years. Before joining us, Samantha would often complain and change jobs, saying, "It just doesn't suit me." After turning 30, as employment conditions became stricter, she lamented, "I can't work for such low pay," and spent her days idly at home without even looking for another job. That's when my mother said, "There's a suitable job for you, Samantha." Thus, my mother welcomed Samantha as a managing director to our company. I have been with the company for 10 years, but still remain a regular employee. The difference in treatment between us sisters surprised those around us, but I thought, figures. That's because my mother always favored my sister since we were children. For the beautiful Samantha, she bought everything from clothes to toys, saying, "You're really adorable, Samantha. This outfit suits you perfectly." On the other hand, not being as cute, I was told, "This is enough for you," while receiving hand-me-downs from cousins and neighborhood children. When I was young, I couldn't understand why I was treated this way. All I wanted was to get my mother's attention, so I ignored my immutable appearance and devoted myself to helping out and studying. Yet my mother showed no interest in me, barely glancing at my report card of straight A's before stamping it. If being beautiful is the only way to be loved, I even considered plastic surgery. Seeing my plight, my aunt, during my high school years, told me why my mother ignored me. I had been told that my father had passed away, but in reality he had run off with a woman from the company the year Samantha was born. This woman was older than my mother and not as attractive. Moreover, she had an air about her that resembled me. My aunt said, "Your mother has high pride, so she couldn't forgive that her husband was stolen by a woman who looked worse and was older than her, yet she seemed to smirk, as if saying serves her right." By the way, my aunt is my mother's sister, and she looks similar to me, neither particularly pretty nor ugly. Well, she made me suffer too, but she was capable at work. Mostly it was through her charm, though. After my father left at 32, my mother took over the company from my deceased grandfather and used her beauty to continuously attract clients and boost performance. The increasing number of buildings exceeding their durability also helped push the need for demolition. Thus, even my aunt and her husband, as well as my mother's cousin and her spouse, respected her. However, recently, with the rising costs of industrial waste disposal and transportation, the balance between demolition fees and actual expenses has become untenable, a common issue across the industry, and our company's performance has been declining. Honestly, making the monthly payroll has been a close call. During this time, as Samantha started working at the company, I became anxious about how we would cover her salary. Then, my mother said, "I'll cut your salary to pay for her. Since we're family, it's only natural." When I logically argued, even if you reduce my salary, it won't cover the managing director's pay, she forcefully replied, "It's your job as a veteran to figure it out. Just do it." Tentatively, I murmured, "Shouldn't Samantha start as a regular employee first?" My mother glared at me sharply and snapped, "Who are you speaking to? It's not your place to say." At that time, we lived in the same house, but Samantha didn't contribute a penny, while I paid $1,500 every month. Of course, even after Samantha joined our company, she didn't contribute financially at home. Growing up, I took care of the household chores as my busy mother couldn't, naturally taking on the responsibilities, while Samantha acted as if it was only natural and did nothing. "Sis, isn't dinner ready yet?" When I was working overtime, Samantha would call to hurry me for dinner. "Hey, I'm at work. Can't you just make something yourself?" I replied. "Ah, what should I make?" "The kitchen is your domain, right? I don't want to use it without permission and get scolded." "You got mad last time. Remember, she brought up a long past incident, ultimately not attempting to cook." Samantha generally doesn't clean up or return things to their places. It seems she still holds a grudge from when I pointed this out once before. Or rather, she uses that as a reason to justify her position of doing nothing. Reluctantly, I would return home to cook dinner, only to head back to the office to work overtime afterward. My mother rarely prepared dinner, and on many days, even if there was food ready, she would just eat whatever she wanted instead. Lately, as my mother began taking Samantha out for business more frequently, the need for me to cook dinner decreased, but the costs of these outings continued to trouble us. This year, my mother turned 63, and she started complaining more about various pains in her body and how heavily drinking affected her. It was during such a time that I was called into the president's office and told, "I'm handing the company over to Samantha, so you, the ugly duckling, are fired as of today." Considering my mother's past actions, it made sense that she would hand the presidency over to Samantha. Reflecting on it, Samantha is now 32, the same age my mother was when she first became president. Perhaps my mother thought that Samantha could use her beauty to attract clients just as she had. However, the idea of being fired because of my appearance was something I simply couldn't accept. Even if my salary were transferred to Samantha, I felt there was hardly any real benefit. When I discussed this with my aunt, it seemed the news of Samantha becoming president had already spread among the employees. But the news of my firing was new to her as well. After pondering a bit, my aunt said, "Well, I'm not entirely sure, but it seems Samantha doesn't like it when everyone tells her, 'Don't worry, we'll ask Kelly whenever she says she wants to do something.' Maybe that's related." But that's because people stopped asking Samantha because her work was sloppy, right? Yes, Samantha was incapable of keeping deadlines, often messed up phone calls, and her work was riddled with typos. Despite having work experience, perhaps because of her good looks, men around her had covered for her, leaving her unaware of her lack of skills. My aunt understood this point too. "Well, that's true. But she probably thinks you're in her way," she said, and with a deep sigh added, "Oh dear, I can't believe she's firing you. That would cripple our company," but her nature of not standing up to my mother prevented any protest from her. I felt a sense of disgust at being related by blood to my mother, my sister, and this unreliable aunt. "So both my mother and my sister dislike me," I said in a dejected tone, to which my aunt hesitated before replying, "Well, yes, your mother is harsh, but you might be better off working elsewhere. You're too capable to not start over somewhere else." There was a slight warmth of kinship in her eyes as she advised me to resign. Standing in the company dyed red by the summer twilight, I vaguely watched a mirage in the distance. Maybe it's time to end this. I felt a sense of liberation spreading through my chest. Turning to my aunt, I smiled calmly for the first time since joining the company. Surprised by my smile, my aunt returned it with a sad expression. Then I spent my remaining days busily preparing handover documents and organizing everything for anyone to understand, and before I knew it, the end of the month, my last day, had arrived. When I went to the president's office at the end of the day, the sound of cicadas was no longer audible, and my mother and sister were laughing and chatting joyfully. "That salesman definitely has a thing for you." "You, that bald guy?" Absolutely no way they laughed without noticing my presence until I deliberately coughed, and then Samantha, looking puzzled, asked, "What's up?" "We don't need dinner today. Today is my last day here. Thank you for everything up to now." "Oh, was that today?" I totally forgot. They burst into laughter again. Realizing I would no longer have to see their faces made me feel refreshed. "I'm also moving out of the house, so please take care," I bowed, and my mother replied with a robotic, "Yes, thank you for your hard work," as I emotionlessly closed the door behind me. From inside, I could hear my sister's voice. "Now we won't have to see that annoying face anymore." "Watch me," I muttered to myself as I left the company I had worked at for many years. A week later, after finishing paperwork at a school, I checked my smartphone and noticed 14 missed calls from my mother in just 2 hours. A bad feeling washed over me, so I put my phone on silent mode and took care of other errands before heading home. The calls from my mother continued to increase, and by the next morning they had totaled 80. The last call came just after 2 a.m. Of course, I had no intention of calling her back. She was now a stranger to me, and I didn't want to hear her voice, fearing it might make me succumb to her demands again. For 35 years, I had been dominated by my mother. To break free from her control, I decided to ignore her calls completely. Although I could have blocked her, I left the calls unchecked as evidence in case she took any obsessive actions. For a while, there were nearly 100 calls a day. At first, checking the missed calls was depressing, but as I got used to it, I began to feel a sense of schadenfreude imagining my mother struggling without me. It was then I truly realized how terribly she had treated me. A year has passed since then. By that time, the calls from my mother had ceased, and I had no idea what was happening with her. Over the past year, I worked various temp jobs while attending a correspondence course for tax accountants, passing the exam successfully. My prior work experience and the diverse tasks I handled at my mother's company had honed my ability to oversee operations, making me valuable in my new position at a major accounting firm. Only now did I start to appreciate the past for having equipped me with these skills. My colleagues at the new workplace were all kind, and we helped each other progress with our work, a stark contrast to the days when everything was dumped on me, and I had to research and work alone until midnight. One day, while visiting a client near my mother's company for work, as I passed by my mother's company, the windows and entrance were noticeably dirty, and the houseplants I had taken care of were completely withered. On the way back, I unexpectedly ran into my mother coming out of the company. Upon spotting me, she exclaimed, "Oh," and approached me. Instinctively fearing I would be scolded, I covered my face with my bag, but she came closer with an unexpectedly affectionate voice. "Oh my, where have you been, Kelly?" I felt a wave of disgust and shrank away. "Do you know how many times I called you? Did you change your smartphone?" It seemed that it never crossed her mind that I was ignoring her calls because I disliked her. After all she had put me through, I was utterly baffled by her way of thinking. Ignoring my stunned expression, she continued, "Oh, but I'm glad I found you. Look at the state of this company. Isn't it terrible? Come back starting tomorrow. I'm not mad." "What?" Like I said, "I've forgiven you for leaving a year ago, so please come back to the company tomorrow." It took me a moment to comprehend what she was saying. In her mind, it must only be the image of a young me running back to her in tears that remained. "Mom, I'm already working at another company, and I'm enjoying it there." As I hesitated to tell her, her expression suddenly turned demonic. "What? Even though our company is in such a mess, who cares about other companies? You belong to me," she yelled in the middle of the street. "Wait a minute. You're the one who fired me, right? What about Samantha? What happened to her?" Snorting, she retorted, "Seriously, I thought Samantha would be more useful, but she messed up by dating 3 clients at the same time. It all fell apart instantly. It would have been fine if she hadn't got caught. Then I put her in the office for a while so she wouldn't be seen, but she can't even clean properly, and she's terrible at accounting. We can't afford to hire someone else. It's really troublesome." After venting her frustrations, she smiled at me and said, "That's why it's your turn, Kelly. Our office has been a mess since you left. You need to take responsibility." Before I resigned, I had created a proper handover manual and explained everything to Samantha. Most likely, Samantha didn't check anything, and my mother probably didn't listen to that part. Even if she did, she either doesn't remember or pretends she didn't hear. After all, there's no responsibility to speak of when she was the one who fired me. Besides, ever since you left, there have been a string of clients who cut off transactions. Don't you find that odd? They said they couldn't trust us anymore because you were gone. That's why I want you back. Having worked there for many years, I was familiar with several of the clients. My mother denigrated my appearance, but there were people who genuinely appreciated my skills. When I resigned, I called to thank the people I owed favors to, and they asked why I was leaving. It was difficult to explain the unreasonable reason for my dismissal, but thinking it was my last chance, I revealed everything. It seems that after hearing why I was fired, these clients decided to stop dealing with my mother's company. Their approach is always the same. They push things through by force, shift the blame onto others, and leave all the cleanup to someone else. This has always been their modus operandi. Biting my lower lip, I thought of the kind faces of my current colleagues, reminding myself that this was the real normal world, and I had been in an abnormal environment. I vowed not to succumb to this pressure anymore. Responsibility or not, it was you, the president, who fired me, Mom. Sensing a change in my tone, my mother briefly looked surprised. And besides, wasn't the reason for my dismissal that I was unattractive? Before I knew it, our argument had drawn a crowd, apparently intrigued by the spectacle. My mother, noticing the stares from those around her, hesitated before saying, "Did I really say that? Could you have misheard me?" "No, I heard you clearly. You said you were handing over the company to my beautiful sister and firing the ugly one. I could not comprehend what you meant. I've worked hard for 10 years, yet you decide to hand over the company to Samantha, who has only been here for 2 years and hardly does her job properly. I question your judgment." As I spoke forcefully, a murmur ran through the crowd. "Really? Is that true? Her own mother said that. Isn't that crazy? Are they really related?" Some even began recording the scene, but I was too filled with anger to care. My mother's face paled under the accusatory glances, and she began to sweat. "Kelly, you've misunderstood. Let's discuss this inside." "Misunderstood? What's misunderstood? If you didn't say it, why not clearly state that right here?" She fell silent, and the people around started whispering, "Ah, she's gone quiet. Then it must be true." I can't believe it. People began whispering in disbelief. Suddenly, something in my mother snapped. "Enough. It's your fault for being ugly and gloomy," she shouted. "Ugly people should just quietly obey the beautiful ones. That's all you're good for." Her harsh words shocked the bystanders, who quickly began filming. "Ugly should obey the beautiful lady appears." That was how the video was captioned, and it quickly spread. This video spread to my mother's business contacts, and soon all the companies halted their dealings with her. It seems that during the year I was gone, there had been illegal dumping and falsification of the books, quite serious offenses. As the video spread, one by one, the clients severed ties. Ultimately, the company went bankrupt, and my mother and Samantha, now without an income, visited my apartment once, but of course I did not open the door. Eventually, they moved into a rundown 45-year-old studio apartment without a bath, living in fear of creditors while working part-time and temporary jobs. Samantha, using her beauty to try and charm male coworkers for an easy time, quickly became disliked by her colleagues and had to change jobs frequently. As for my mother, the video never disappeared from the internet, and she was ostracized by her coworkers, working silently alone. Meanwhile, I found myself a boyfriend at my new job. He's not handsome, but he is sincere and serious, and he likes how dedicated I am to my work. We plan to marry soon. I spend my days feeling genuinely grateful that I've always taken my responsibilities seriously. Sarah Johnson was gazing out of the window of a skyscraper in Manhattan. Having just turned 40, her eyes reflected a melancholic expression, contrasting with the hustle and bustle of New York. Her life was one many people envied. She had succeeded in the marketing industry and was thriving as an executive at a top advertising agency. However, deep within, Sarah always felt something was missing: a warm, loving family she had longed for since childhood. Sarah's upbringing was far from smooth. Born in a small town in Connecticut, she lost her mother to cancer at the age of 10. Her father, George, was a successful banker on Wall Street, but after his wife's death, he immersed himself in work, barely taking care of Sarah and her younger brother, Michael, who was 4 years her junior. "Why did you have to leave us, Mom?" Young Sarah would cry night after night, clutching her mother's photograph. The only comfort she found was in a luxurious watch her mother had left her, a custom piece from a super premium brand, engraved with "My dear Sarah, always with you." Sarah was forced to mature early. After school, she would handle shopping, cooking, and laundry, caring for her young brother. She had little time to play with friends, and even weekends were consumed by chores. "Sarah, can you help me with my homework?" Michael would ask sweetly. "Sure, but first we need to prepare dinner." She would respond with a smile. During those days, her mother's watch was her emotional support. In tough and sad moments, holding the watch tight to her chest would bring her mother's gentle smile to mind, giving her courage. She wore this watch during her university entrance exams and job interviews. "Mom, watch over me? I'll do my best." Sarah's efforts paid off, and she was admitted to the prestigious Yale University. There, she became fascinated with the world of marketing. After graduating, she moved to New York and secured a job at an advertising agency. Her talent and hard work quickly made her a notable figure in the industry. At the age of 30, Sarah met Tom. He was an aspiring musician with a charming smile, whom she met after a live performance at a bar. "Your eyes are beautiful, like a starry sky," Tom said, instantly falling for her. Sarah was drawn to Tom's brightness and kindness, particularly impressed by his passionate talks about his sister Jessica. "My sister is amazing, really. She's an actress on Broadway. I'll introduce you to her someday." As Sarah's relationship with Tom progressed, she began to believe that the ideal family she had long dreamed of might finally become a reality. She hoped that Tom's love for his family would extend to their new family as well. The wedding was held on the rooftop of a hotel overlooking Central Park. With the shining Manhattan skyline as a backdrop, Sarah was radiant in her pure white wedding dress. "I, Sarah, take you, Tom, to be my husband, to love and to cherish, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, and to walk together forever." The guests shed tears of emotion at Sarah's vows. However, unbeknownst to everyone, this happy moment was also the beginning of upcoming trials. Initially, married life went smoothly. Sarah struggled to balance work and home, while Tom continued his music career and worked part-time. A year after their marriage, they were blessed with a boy. Named Ethan, he became a new light of hope for Sarah. "Hey Tom, doesn't Ethan look just like us?" Sarah smiled happily while holding the newborn baby. "Yeah, really. But his eyes resemble yours. He'll surely become a smart kid," Tom replied proudly. However, with Ethan's birth, cracks gradually began to appear in their relationship. Tom was not active in parenting, leaving all the nighttime feedings and diaper changes to Sarah. Yet Sarah did not complain. From her own childhood experiences, she knew how crucial the presence of both parents was for a child. "It's okay, Ethan. Mommy is here," Sarah whispered gently as she soothed the crying Ethan at night. Meanwhile, Tom remained immersed in his music, and his time at home gradually decreased. It became clear that he was spending most of the time he was away at home with his sister, Jessica. "Sorry, Sarah. Jessica got a new role today. I have to celebrate with her," Tom would say. "But today is Ethan's parents' day in kindergarten. You promised," Sarah reminded him. "Oh, that. I'm sorry. But Jessica needs me. You understand, right?" Such exchanges became increasingly frequent. Sarah began to worry about Tom's unusual obsession with his sister, Jessica. She felt very disappointed by Tom's attitude of prioritizing his sister over his own family. However, Sarah maintained a facade of calmness. For Ethan's sake, she wanted to protect her family at all costs. She did not want her son to experience the loneliness of a single-parent family that she had endured. One day, Sarah faced a shocking incident. Returning from work, she opened the drawer of her dresser as usual. The precious watch, a keepsake from her mother, was missing. "That's strange. It should have been here." Sarah searched the entire room, but the watch was nowhere to be found. Anxiety and panic gripped her heart. At that moment, she heard the front door open. "Tom, I'm home." "Hey, do you know where my watch is? I can't find it." Tom hesitated for a moment before dropping a bombshell. "Oh, that. I gave it to Jessica. She wanted it." Sarah couldn't believe her ears. "What? Are you joking?" "That watch is a keepsake from my mother. You should know that." "I know. But Jessica really wanted it. Plus, a beauty like her wearing it would make your mother happy too." Sarah was at a loss for words. Anger and sorrow welled up inside her. How could you? How could you do such a thing? You know how important that watch is to me. Stop nagging. It's just a watch." Tom retorted irritably. "It's not just a watch. It's... Unable to hold back her tears, Sarah's voice trembled. "Enough already. If you're going to nag about it, divorce is also an option." Tom's words were cold, deeply wounding Sarah's heart. In that moment, Sarah resolved that she would no longer endure the pain. For her and her son's happiness, she had to take action. The next day, Sarah took Ethan and returned to her childhood home. Her father, George, seemed to instantly sense that something was wrong just by looking at her expression. "Sarah, are you okay?" "What happened?" Through tears, Sarah explained the situation. George sighed and embraced his daughter gently. "I didn't realize how much you were struggling. I won't let you be alone again." Comforted by her father's words, Sarah shed tears of relief. She felt the complex emotions she had harbored towards her father for years slowly beginning to dissolve. Then, unexpected help appeared: her younger brother, Michael. He had become a successful lawyer. "Sis, I'll support you with everything I've got. We'll make Tom take legal responsibility." Grateful for Michael's words, Sarah's heart was filled with appreciation. The brother she had cared for since childhood was now ready to protect her. She felt the strength of her family bonds anew. A month later, an unexpected call came from Jessica. "Sarah, your watch caused my engagement to be broken off." Jessica's voice trembled with anger. Sarah listened calmly. Jessica explained that she had worn Sarah's watch to meet her fiancé's parents. Her fiancé's father, the CEO of a major company, was shocked upon seeing the watch. "This watch was a gift I gave to an amazing woman who worked under me. She passed away from an illness, but I heard it was passed on to her daughter. There's no way you should have it." Panicked, Jessica lied. "I got this from my brother's wife." However, the CEO didn't believe her. He contacted Sarah directly to confirm the truth, and the real story was revealed. "I cannot let my son marry a woman who would take a precious keepsake from her own brother's wife." Thus, Jessica's engagement was broken off. Not only that, but she began to experience strange occurrences. "Ever since I started wearing that watch, I've almost been in car accidents and I keep having nightmares. It's like I'm cursed. I'm returning it. I never want to be near it again." Sarah received the watch with mixed feelings. Relieved to have her mother's keepsake back, she was unsure how to move forward after everything that had happened. It was then that Tom suddenly appeared. "Sarah, if you want a divorce, you'll have to pay alimony, and you'll need to leave the apartment as well." Sarah replied calmly. "Tom, there's no need for us to discuss this anymore. From now on, we'll communicate through lawyers." Tom looked at Michael, surprised. "Aren't you my wife's little brother, Michael?" Michael responded firmly. "Mr. Tom, from now on, I will represent Sarah as her lawyer. Your actions are clearly unjust and could be legally challenged." Tom was visibly shaken. "Just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you can act all high and mighty. I don't want a divorce. Without mutual consent, it can't happen." Michael remained composed. "Ever since getting married, Sarah has been supporting the household financially. You haven't cooperated with parenting and have been financially dependent on her. Moreover, you disposed of her precious keepsake without permission. These actions are valid grounds for divorce." Tom's demeanor began to soften as his panic became apparent. "Sarah, the divorce is just a joke, right? I was wrong. Forgive me. Let's try again, for Ethan's sake." Sarah responded firmly. "It's too late, Tom. I can't trust you anymore. I'm getting a divorce. I will raise Ethan." Later, through mediation in court, Sarah was able to officially divorce Tom. The division of property and child support were granted, and the ownership of the apartment was confirmed to belong to Sarah. Initially, Tom was reluctant to make the payments, but when Michael showed a readiness to take legal action, Tom reluctantly complied. After the divorce, Sarah started a new chapter in her life. She and Ethan lived in a skyscraper in Manhattan, juggling work and parenting. One day, she took Ethan to the park on a pleasant autumn afternoon. "Mom, push the swing," Ethan exclaimed joyfully. Sarah stood behind her son and gently started pushing the swing. Ethan's laughter filled the park. Higher, higher. As Sarah responded to her son's request and looked up at the sky, white clouds floated across the blue sky. Her mother's face came to mind. "Mom, are you watching?" "I'm doing my best." At that moment, Sarah looked at her watch. It was the keepsake from her mother. The words engraved on the back still warmed her heart. "My dear Sarah, always with you." Sarah smiled. Indeed, her mother was still with her, and she was with Ethan. The love passed down through generations. That was the true bond of family Sarah felt. Meanwhile, life became difficult for Tom and Jessica. To pay for the property division and child support, Tom had borrowed from several financial institutions. Chased by repayments, he had to work day and night. Dreams of a music career had become a thing of the distant past. Jessica, too, was burdened by a substantial debt, a consequence of her lavish lifestyle. Her jobs on Broadway had dwindled, and she had started working as a showgirl in nightclubs. Now, the two of them were living together in an old apartment in Brooklyn. Their former glory had faded, and they were constantly chased by the demands of daily life. "Why has it come to this?" Tom murmured, holding his head in his hands in the cramped room of their cheap apartment. While removing her makeup, Jessica responded with a bitter expression. "If it weren't for that watch." A curse, of all things, coming from that woman. "Enough, Jessica. Stop blaming Sarah. We brought this upon ourselves," Tom said. Jessica fell silent at Tom's words. Deep down, they both understood that their own actions had led to these consequences. Meanwhile, Sarah's life had entered a new phase. After the divorce, she put even more effort into her work. Her efforts paid off, and she was promoted to vice president of the advertising agency. Her income increased significantly, allowing her to provide a better education for Ethan. Her father, George, was also fully supporting Sarah's life while watching over his grandson's growth. On weekends, George would take care of Ethan, giving Sarah some time to rest. "Thank you so much, Dad, for taking care of Ethan." Sarah expressed her gratitude. George smiled gently. "It's okay, Sarah. I couldn't be there for you kids back then, so let me support you as much as I can now." Feeling the family bonds strengthening over time, Sarah savored her happiness. One day, Sarah had an unexpected encounter. At a meeting for an advertising campaign at a client's company, she met Paul Brown, who was also serving as a vice president. Paul, a man of Sarah's age, was known for his gentle nature and keen insight. They became close through work and eventually started having personal conversations. "You're an amazing mother. Balancing work and parenting must be tough, right?" Paul expressed his respect for Sarah's way of life. Sarah smiled in response. "Yes, it's tough. But I manage because of my son, and I have support from my family. That's wonderful. I'm also raising a daughter alone. I lost my wife 5 years ago." Sarah felt a connection after hearing Paul's words. They began to share their experiences and challenges as single parents. Over time, Sarah and Paul's relationship deepened. They introduced their children to each other, and sometimes spent holidays together. Ethan came to affectionately call Paul Uncle Paul, and Paul's daughter Emily grew fond of Sarah. "Mom, it's fun playing with Uncle Paul and Emily," Ethan said joyfully. Seeing her son smile, Sarah felt a warmth in her heart. She sensed a new family dynamic gradually taking shape. On Sarah's 45th birthday, Paul proposed to her. "Sarah, meeting you brought joy back into my life. Could we walk this life together from here on out?" With tears in her eyes, Sarah replied, "Yes, Paul. I feel the same." Their wedding was a small party attended only by family and close friends. Ethan and Emily walking with bouquets warmed the hearts of all the attendees. Sarah wore her mother's keepsake watch. During the ceremony, she looked at the watch and whispered in her heart, "Mom, I finally found it. True happiness." After the wedding, Sarah and Paul started their lives together as a new family with their children. There were initial adjustments, but with mutual care and the children's adaptability, they gradually built a stable home. Ethan became a middle schooler, and Emily was in her upper years of elementary school. The two got along like siblings. "Mom, I want to be a lawyer in the future. Like Uncle Michael, I want to help people who are in trouble." Seeing Ethan talk about his dreams, Sarah felt a deep love. Meanwhile, Emily had begun to blossom with her artistic talent. "Mom, Sarah, look. I drew a picture of our family." In the picture Emily had drawn, Sarah, Paul, Ethan, and herself, depicted with smiling faces. Seeing the picture, Sarah shed tears of happiness. Time passed, and when Sarah turned 50, she received unexpected news. Tom had been hospitalized with cirrhosis. "Sarah, it seems Tom's condition isn't good. Are you planning to visit him?" her friend Jennifer asked. Sarah thought for a while. The past with Tom had been painful, but he was Ethan's biological father. Over time, the anger in Sarah's heart had softened. "Ethan, your dad's been hospitalized. Do you want to go see him?" Sarah asked her son. Ethan appeared a bit perplexed, but answered, "Yeah, let's go." When they visited Tom in the hospital, Sarah was shocked by his drastically changed appearance. His former brightness had faded, and he lay there, emaciated. "Sarah." "Ethan." "Did you come to see me?" Tom asked in a weak voice. "Yes, we came. How are you? Feeling a bit better?" Sarah asked gently. "Not bad. Thank you." Tom then looked at Ethan. "Hey, you've grown a lot. You're a fine young man now." Ethan replied with a bit of embarrassment. "Yeah, I'm in middle school now." For a while after that, the three of them engaged in a quiet conversation. They avoided discussing the past and talked about Ethan's current situation and Tom's health. As they were leaving, Tom said to Sarah, "Sarah, I'm truly sorry. Really sorry." Tom apologized. Sarah felt the long-held emotions quietly dissolve. "It's okay, Tom. Just rest now." As she left the hospital, Sarah was enveloped in complex emotions. The wounds of the past hadn't fully healed, but she recognized the importance of forgiveness. That night, back at home, she shared everything with Paul. "Sarah, you are a truly strong woman. You've overcome your past and are living looking forward. I'm proud of you," Paul said as he hugged her gently. In Paul's arms, Sarah felt a sense of security and reflected on her life. She had endured hardships, but she had overcome them to reach where she was now. And her current happiness was a result of all her past experiences. Months later, Tom passed away. Sarah and Ethan attended his funeral. Jessica was not there. After the funeral, Sarah looked at her mother's keepsake watch. The hands of the clock continued to mark time steadfastly. Life moves forward just like this watch. Sarah carefully put away the watch. It was no longer a reminder of painful memories, but a precious entity that had witnessed her life's journey. Time passed, and Ethan became a college student. Influenced by Michael, he was studying law and aiming to become a lawyer. Emily was in high school, further honing her artistic talents. Sarah was nearing 60 and had become the CEO of an advertising agency, respected in the industry. One day, Sarah was in her office talking to a young female employee. "I'm struggling with balancing work and parenting," the employee confided. Sarah smiled gently. "It's okay, I've been through the same thing. Let's find a good solution together." At that moment, Sarah reflected on her life's journey. She had overcome hardships and difficulties, and now she was in a position to help others. Her experiences were now empowering many people. Leaving the office, Sarah walked through the streets of Manhattan. The skyline, filled with towering buildings, had not changed in 30 years. However, her life had changed significantly. When she got home, Paul greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome back, Sarah. How was your day?" Sarah responded happily. "It was a very fulfilling day. How about you?" The two began preparing dinner while sharing their day's events. Soon, Ethan and Emily returned home, and the family's time together began. "Mom, I got an internship," Ethan reported excitedly. "I won a prize in an art competition." Emily was also happy. As Sarah proudly watched her children's growth, she suddenly remembered her mother. She quietly stood up and took out her mother's keepsake watch. "Ethan, Emily, have I ever told you about this watch?" The children looked at the watch with interest. "This was my mother's, your grandmother's keepsake. It's something precious that has watched over me for a long time." Sarah read the words engraved on the back of the watch. "My dear Sarah, always with you. Grandma was always watching over Mom, wasn't she?" Ethan said, moved. Emily's eyes sparkled as she added, "Such beautiful words. I want to be someone who can keep caring for loved ones like that too." Paul placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder and gently said, "Your mother would be so proud. You've grown into such a wonderful woman." Sarah smiled through her tears. Her life had not been smooth, but now she was truly happy. All the past pains and sorrows had strengthened her and built the foundation of her current happiness. And her mother's love had always guided her. Sarah looked around at her family. Her loving husband, her dependable son who had grown so much, her talented daughter, and the presence of her mother still beside her. "Mom, I am happy. I finally found the warmth of a true family."